Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. If you enjoying this fanfic then press the like button and subscribe my channel.
Let's start a fanfic. Which is what if Naruto x Harem x Samui x YUGITO x FUU Part Naruto x Harem Part 3. Okay, class. We will now begin with the written portion of the exams. C says as he and Daioki hand out all the tests to the students. Daioki handed all of them the exams, his unusual white eyes looking at all of them, making many uncomfortable as if he was going to execute them at any moment. The assistant had put a genjutsu in every exam. It was the student's job to break the genjutsu. If they didn't, they would be disqualified right away. Naruto could feel no malicious feelings coming from him, despite his intense look. Naruto may not have a Sharingan or a Byakugan to see through genjutsus, but his natural sensory ability can tell that there is chakra all over his paper. He subtly made a single hand sign and dispelled the genjutsu immediately. Now he was able to see the real questions, and it wasn't as complicated as he thought it was. Naruto was able to pass the test with flying colors. Now, we will move on to the practical portion of the exams. First, we shall do the kunai and shuriken throwing test, follow up with a taijutsu sparring session with your chunin instructors. C said as he led all the students outside to the academy courtyard. Academy training courtyard. Almost all of the civilian-born students perform adequately with the kunai and shuriken tests, but nothing beyond amazing. There were 10 targets, and they needed to hit 7 out of 10 to pass. Samui and Yugito passed with 9/10 targets hit. Karui was able to hit 8 out of 10, the same for Omoi and Atsui. It was finally Naruto's time to shine. C brought him a set of weapons for him to throw. He picked up all the weapons and channeled wind chakra into them. As he threw them all simultaneously, not only that they hit their marks perfectly, but they went straight through the targets. Everyone's eyes were widened, and their faces were shocked and awed, including C and Daioki. Naruto's aim was not only true, but his throwing arm was deadly as well. His female classmates, including Samui and Yugito, loudly cheered his name out for his awesome display of pure badass. Naruto was the only one to get a perfect 10 out of 10. Okay, class, now we will move on to our sparring sessions. You will each have a taijutsu spar with Daioki-san here. If you are able to last 3 out of 5 minutes against him, you pass. But on the unlikely chance that you can beat Daioki-san, not only will you pass the test, but you will receive extra points as well. C says with a smile. Some civilian-born students were slightly sloppy in their spars, as they could barely hold off against Daioki's light attacks. Samui and Yugito lasted 4 minutes, while Karui, Omoi, and Atsui were able to reach the minimum 3 minutes. It is clear that the last 4 needed more training with their taijutsu. Last but not least is everyone's favorite blonde and one of the 2 banes of screaming fangirls. Naruto walks into the sparring ring with Daioki. C stands between them as he raises his arm, ready to start the match. Hajime, C yelled out as he brought his hand down. Daioki didn't waste any time as he charged fiercely at Naruto. Naruto took his defensive stance as he continued to block the not so surprisingly heavy attacks from the Chunin. Naruto knew there was a time limit to the fight, so he didn't want to waste any more time on the Chunin. After blocking another punch, Naruto swiftly jabbed Daioki's throat, causing him to choke momentarily. Afterward, Naruto continuously sends a barrage of quick jabs to the Chunin's gut, causing him to lean his body forward. Naruto then proceeds to front flip behind Daioki and elbow strike the Chunin's back knees to drop him down hard on them to meet the blonde boy's size. And as Naruto quickly spun around in front of him, the blonde grabbed the Chunin's head and sent a devastating knee strike to Daioki's face, breaking his nose. The blonde expected the Chunin to fall unconscious, but he turned to lightning. The blonde jumped away just in time not to be electrocuted. Good job, Naruto-san. It seems you are not all talk. The Chunin complimented behind the blonde, who grinned. C was once again shocked and awed, and so was everyone else. Naruto had actually beaten a Chunin clone in a taijutsu match, and it was a devastating defeat. His classmates were still in a state of shock and awe. There was no cheering whatsoever, not even from his fangirls, who were still staring at him with big hearts in their eyes. But Karui and Atsui made a mental note never to piss off Naruto again. Back to the classroom, all his friends now surrounded Naruto. Holy crap, Naruto. That was awesome, Atsui yelled out. Sai remind me never to be your opponent Naruto. Fighting against you will be too disastrous. Omoi said, eyeing on his lollipop. Fighting against anyone is already too disastrous for you, Omoi. Karui yelled at her friend. Guys, come on, you're embarrassing me. Besides, you all did great, too, Yano. Naruto said with an embarrassed blush on his face. Yeah, but neither of us managed to defeat Daioki-sensei. Especially the way you did. Samui said to her favorite blonde. Yeah, Naruto, I know it was a spar and all, but I think you broke the guy's nose. He was lucky he was a clone. Omoi said as he cringed at the thought of his sensei's nose. Ha ha ha, sorry, I guess I got a little carried away there, Naruto said as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. A little, that's it, I'm never fighting against you. I prefer to keep my nose. Omoi said lazily. The group of friends shared a small laugh, and even Samui joined in a little until C finally came into the room to announce the final exam. Alright, everyone, now it's time for the ninjutsu exam. As a gentle reminder, each student must successfully perform the transformation jutsu, the substitution jutsu, an elemental jutsu, and finally, the clone jutsu. Remember, you must produce at least 4 clones to graduate. I will call out your names in alphabetical order, and once I do, you may proceed to the examination area. Good luck. C then leaves the room before calling upon the first student in the examination area. Alphabetically. Well, this might take a while. Naruto said a little nervously. Not for me. My name starts with A, K, Karui says sadly as she rubs her eyes. Don't worry, Karui. I'm sure all of us will do just fine. Atsui says, trying to reassure his second best friend. You're right, Atsui. Besides, if I pass, my mum told me she'll teach me a kenjutsu move. Karui says. That's nothing. My mum says she will teach me a new jutsu when I pass, hehe. Atsui said confidently and excited to learn his clan's signature technique. Samui was smiling at her friend's happy conversation until she noticed that Naruto and Yugito were suddenly feeling down at mentioning their friends' exciting plans about their mothers. Sometimes even she can forget that her dear friend doesn't have a mother. Seeing him look so sad made her feel sad as well. She felt like she just wanted to give him a big hug to cheer him up. Samui looked at Karui, and the latter looked back at her. They then nodded at each other in agreement, thinking that they had the same idea. Hey guys, how about after the exam, we all celebrate together? Maybe at that barbecue restaurant that Atsui likes so much. Karui says. Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll be together for one last time before we are separated into teams. And who knows, it might take a long time before we see each other again. Samui added casually, trying to convince her friends to celebrate with Naruto and Yugito. It might be a disaster for my mum. So count me in, Omoi says, surprisingly happy to piss his mum off. Well, I guess I can always learn my mum's jutsu later, Atsui said like he didn't mind. He just hopes that his mum doesn't take back her offer. So Naruto-kun, Yugito-chan, what do you say? Want to join us? Samui asked the depressed blondes with a bright smile. Naruto and Yugito knew what Samui was trying to do, and they couldn't help but smile at her sincere gesture. He didn't want any pity parties from his friends because of his loneliness, but he also appreciated that she didn't use that as the main reason for them to spend time together. Sure, count me in. Naruto says with a warm smile at his friend, who in turn smiles back at him. Same here. I would love some sushi. Yugito said, eyeing her pink lips at the thought of sushi. One by one, Each student was called to the examination room. Naruto Yatsuki, C called out his name from the speaker. Naruto finally heard his name, and he then begrudgingly made his way to the examination area. Examination area. When Naruto walked into the room, he saw C sitting behind a large table with 4 other chunins between him. On their table were many brand new Kumo headbands. When Naruto saw the beautiful cloth and metal, he couldn't help but smile, as he had always wanted one ever since he decided to become a shinobi of Kumo. Alright, Naruto, you know the drill. First, we will start off with the transformation jutsu. Whenever you are ready, C instructed. Naruto nodded as he made a single hand seal and transformed into the first person that popped into his head. His legendary grandfather, Yatsuki, the third Raikage. In all his armored glory. Sensei. At least it is a good copy. C said, smiling, being reminded a little of his time under I's teaching. C went to inspect the transformation to see any flaws and found none. It was the perfect copy of the third leader of their village. Excellent work, Naruto, C says with a smile. Now, please perform the substitution jutsu. Another chunin requested to the blonde. Naruto then made a few hand seals and switched places with C. C is now standing where Naruto stood, and Naruto is sitting where C sat. Ta-da! Naruto says like it was no big deal. I didn't mean to switch places with me, Naruto, C said, with an annoyed tick mark on his head. Well, there aren't any random wooden logs around here, aren't there, C-sensei? Naruto pointed out with a smirk, trying to defend his actions with a smart-ass comment. Fair point. Daioki, please remind me to stock up the examination room with some wooden logs next time. C told his assistant. Will do, C, Daioki says, trying to suppress a smile. Naruto went back to where he stood, and C retook his seat. Now, do an elemental jutsu, whichever you want, C instructed the blonde. During the years in the academy, they had been taught C to be ranked ninjutsu. All students who want to graduate must know how to do at least one elemental ninjutsu. Lightning style. Charge. Naruto's arm was engulfed in purple lightning, causing everything to shake. The second part of the ninjutsu was to punch someone with the same arm, and the blonde thought the nearby wall would be a good target. Charging forward, his arm was stopped at the last second by Daioki. That's good enough, Naruto-san. The man said casually. The blonde was surprised to see his hand wasn't affected by the purple lightning and could swear his white eyes glittered silver momentarily. Okay, Naruto, now it is time for the clone jutsu, Daioki said with a smile. Naruto took deep breaths for this one. He opened his eyes after remembering the training he had with the third Raikage. And a confident smile appears on his face. Whenever you are ready, Naruto, Daioki said with a smile. The blonde Yatsuki then made several signs with his fingers and yelled out. Multi-lightning clone jutsu. A large gathering of clouds suddenly appeared, and when the smoke cleared, there were 20 Narutos standing before the shocked-faced Jonins. Naruto, are those? C asked, still in awe. Lightning clones, C-sensei. Solid copies of yours truly. Naruto said with a smile. Impressive, Naruto. Never before have I seen an academy student perform a B-rank jutsu with such ease. C said with pride for his student. Congratulations Naruto, you graduated, Daioki said with a proud smile as he handed Naruto his headband. Yes. Thanks, C-sensei. But I hope you still remember our promise. You did say you would treat me to ramen if I pass. Well, I hope you just got your salary, hehehe. Naruto said as he happily took the headband from Daioki's hand and wore it proudly around his forehead. Please have mercy on my wallet Naruto, C said with anime tears starting to fall from his eyes. Fine, fine. I won't order more than 10. We'll do it tomorrow, though. Tonight I'm celebrating with my friends. Naruto said with a smile. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow, Naruto. C said with his own smile at his secret, favorite, student. Naruto then happily leaves the examination room. As Naruto was proudly walking out to the academy entrance, he was immediately swarmed by his friends. Samui is the first, as she tackles him with a tight hug. Congratulations, Naruto-kun. I knew you could do it. Samui said with her bright smile, causing Naruto to blush heavily, especially the way her assets pressed against his body. Soon engulfed by another hug from Yugito, both girls hugged him close. Naruto blushed furiously, and it seemed his friends were doing this on purpose to tease him. He then noticed her Kumo headband, which was now tied around her waist like a belt. Ha ha ha, thanks, Samui-chan. I knew you could do it too. So you guys were waiting for me this whole time? The blonde Yatsuki asked, feeling very warm that his friends would wait for him. Of course, silly. We have a plan, remember? Yugito said. I didn't even want to pass. The reason I even tried is because I kept hearing Naruto and my mum's voices in my head. Thanks to you, I'll have more work coming up soon. Omoi said lazily. Don't worry, I will be right there to make sure nothing happens to us. Naruto said, giving his friend a thumbs up. While I don't mind the positive reinforcement, but can it be towards mediocre shinobi? Omoi asks, hoping his best friend won't push him too much. No way, Omoi, you're a brilliant guy, and I know you can be great shinobi if you just put a little effort into it. And as your friend, I am going to make sure you make it happen, Naruto said with a sincere smile, as he genuinely believed in his weird friend. This will be a disaster for the entire shinobi world. Fine. But if you're not on the same team with me, you can forget about my greatness. 'Cause I'll be sleeping most of the time without your constant nagging. Omoi said honestly. Ha! Don't worry, Omoi. If you're on the same team with Naruto-kun and I, we'll make sure always to get you off your lazy ass. Yugito said with a smile, as she liked the idea of Naruto and her literally beating the laziness out of Omoi. Excited for their future as Kumo shinobis. Naruto was deep in thought. He couldn't scratch an itch. He had dreamed of a woman with red hair, but he didn't know who she was. Still, her purple eyes were mesmerizing. He felt as if he should know her but couldn't quite put the finger on it, and the only people who were known to have purple eyes were from Uzumaki clan, similar to those from Senju clan who were known for their green eyes. He wondered why he would dream of that woman out of the blue. Naruto-kun, are you okay? Yugito asked her deep-thinking best friend. Why yeah, sorry, I was just thinking. Naruto answered honestly. About what, blonde? Omoi asked his Yatsuki best friend, despite the nickname. Well, do any of you guys know the girl that ran past us earlier? Naruto asked all his friends. Girl, what does she look like? Atsui asked. Well, she has light blonde hair tied in a loose ponytail, with some strands sticking out. She was also wearing swirl-tinted glasses. And I think she's from our class. Ring any bells? Naruto asked as he tries to recall all the little details he knew about the girl. I think the girl you are describing is Shiho, Naruto-kun, Samui answered her blonde crush. Shiho? Naruto asked his blonde-haired friend. Yeah, she's a very quiet girl in class, but she is actually super smart. Especially when it comes to hunting. Karui added in, trying to recall all she knew about Naruto's mystery girl. Why are you asking about her all of a sudden, Naruto-kun? Yugito asked with a furrowed brow. When she ran past us earlier, I think she was crying. I don't think she passed the exam. Naruto answered sadly. Oh man, Atsui added with a sad tone. Soon they all were served their favorite dishes. Samui and Yugito were sitting on Naruto's right and left. The poor male blonde was a bit uncomfortable with the way Samui was eyeing him, with a predatory look, and the way her hand often brushed over his thighs. Naruto took a deep breath to calm himself, feeling something stirring. Samui leaned a bit closer to her favorite blonde, showing off her cleavage. She knew what she was doing and loved that Naruto found her body appealing. Samui, what are you doing? Naruto murmured, trying to be as quiet and discreet as possible. You didn't tell me about the package you were hiding, Samui whispered seductively. The male blonde felt a shiver in his body but almost gasped when her soft hand sneaked under his pants, rubbing his up and down. Thank the gods that it was hidden from the wooden table. The blonde found it hard to think straight. Shish, you don't want people to see what we are doing? Samui asked coyly. Naruto's only answer was a grunt. This earned a smirk from Samui. She couldn't wait for tomorrow. Yugito smirked at the obvious way her two favorite blondes were flirting with each other, not that she was bothered by it. She, Samui, and Mabui knew of Naruto's crush on them. She couldn't wait until tomorrow after their teams were chosen. Raikage Tower tomorrow, Genin registration room. After Naruto had finished taking his ID picture for his shinobi identification file, he went straight to the Raikage Tower to deliver them to his dear old Gigi. I is now sitting behind a long desk between C and another Chunin. He is currently reviewing the files of all of this year's graduates to determine which, potential Genin, belong to which team. Many of this year's graduates are clan heirs and heiress that has excellent potential to become strong shinobis and kunoichis of Kumo. Many have their own unique talents and strengths, but regardless, they are still children that require Jonin's supervision, training, guidance, and field experiences if they are ever going to survive. Luckily for them, this is not a time of war. Yet. But there are still many dangers they could encounter the second they leave the safety of their village, such as criminals, bandits, or worse, enemy or rogue ninja. When I opened Naruto's file and saw his picture, he couldn't help but be reminded of his rival. Naruto looks so much like his father now. Minato was a strong and powerful shinobi, but he was tragically taken away from the world at such a young age. I wasn't a fool. He knew Naruto had noticed the lack of similarities between him and his family. It was very obvious, actually. The only thing preventing him from bluntly asking was perhaps the thought that it was just his imagination. I had yet to tell him the truth, using the excuse that Naruto wasn't ready yet, but I knew that wasn't the problem. He was afraid that Naruto would never see him as his father again. But I knew in times like this, his grandson would find out himself, eventually. All needed was for him to take the courage to ask or encounter Konoha Shinobi, which would be even worse. With that thought in mind, I decided to tell him once he officially became a genin of Kumo. I felt very concerned for his blonde grandson. The day has finally come for him to test his capabilities in the real world while he does not doubt his apprentice's skills and intelligence, but due to past unforeseen tragedies. But when I sees Naruto standing before him, with his big blue eyes full of hope and determination, the old Raikage couldn't help but smile and feel a great sense of ease in his heart. Naruto is the most dedicated person he has ever met, and thanks to his long years of training, he has become a fine young shinobi. All I could do right now, as a sensei in Raikage, is have faith in his blonde grandson. Naruto, I hope you know I am very proud of you, my boy. You showed great potential as a Kumo shinobi. I said to the blonde, his voice filled with pride. C couldn't help but nod in agreement. He had to agree that the blonde was unique. He wondered just how far the blonde would go. Haha, thank you, Gigi Raikage. It means a lot coming from you. I promise I won't let you down. Naruto said with a bright smile to his Gigi before giving a respectful bow. Shinobi Academy, C's classroom. All of the young graduates looked very excited. They are still considered graduates, and not yet full-fledged genins because, unbeknownst to them, they still have one more test to pass. Omoi was sleeping on his desk next to Karui, who was bored out of her mind, and the idiot sleeping beside her wasn't helping the situation. Naruto arrives via Shunshin in the middle of the class, which catches the attention of his classmates. Show off, Omoi said with a scoff. But he too wanted to learn that jutsu for its conveniences. Correction, I'm a showman. I'm the greatest showman, Naruto said with a smirk as he sat next to Omoi. Am I on time? The blonde asked his friend. You are right on time, Naruto. Don't worry. Not everyone has arrived yet. Karui reassures. Oh yeah. Where's Samui and Yugito? Naruto wonders. Speak of the devils. Samui and Yugito opened the door. Naruto had to hide the blush on his cheeks when he saw Samui. What happened yesterday was still fresh in his mind, the way her soft hand had felt around his. The blonde didn't know how the others hadn't noticed. Last night after everyone had gone to their homes, Naruto had cornered Samui, wanting to clear things up. He knew he had a crush on her, but he didn't know what to do about Mabui and Yugito. I like you, Naruto, but you like Mabui and Yugito too? Samui asked, but more like stating a fact as her arms crossed behind Naruto's neck, bringing him close to her. How do you know? Naruto asked with a blush, looking downwards, feeling a little ashamed, when her finger on his chin made her look up at her eyes. We like you, Naruto, and we wouldn't mind sharing you. I talked with Yugito and Mabui, and we agreed about it. Samui said sweetly. She had to admit that she was a little jealous of Mabui. The secretary of the Raikage was very beautiful, with a round and large bosom, one of the prettiest in Kumo. Naruto smiled upon hearing that before asking if she was sure she wanted this. He wanted to make sure he wasn't crossing a line. She answered by kissing his lips before pulling away, but only slightly. Samui again delighted her lips with his. They barely brushed sweetly and stayed like that for a few seconds. His hands were still holding her waist, and Samui couldn't hold back. She finally kissed him fully. That kiss was followed by another, and then another until finally, Naruto pulled her closer to him and began to kiss her deeply. It was a slow but very hot kiss. Their lips were moving together. You could hear the sound of their lips coming together several times. Samui edged slightly as Naruto squeezed her buttocks with both hands, and their tongues finally met. The kiss increased in ferocity, but still, neither dominated the other. Their tongues brushed sweetly between their mouths, and Samui edged in mid-kiss every time the blonde squeezed her with his hands. They had stopped before they went overboard, but Samui had made sure to kiss him goodnight. Samui and Yugito sat beside their favorite blonde. Naruto greeted them. They were soon having a conversation about their teams. Soon joined by Karui and Atsui. C then walks into the classroom after returning from the Raikage Tower. He is now holding a clipboard with the list of teams that the third Raikage has already decided on. Meanwhile, Raikage's office. I had called upon all of his Kumo Jonins to his office for a supposed, short briefing, regarding team selections and placements. I am sure you are all wondering why I select these particular Genins on your teams. Well, the keyword is simple, balance. While I had originally planned to choose one team with one specific specialties, such as an assault team, a tracking team, and a team specializing in stalling. But after giving it some thought, I realized that formation is completely flawed, especially for a team of inexperienced Genins. Each team needs one and the other. Specifically, each team should have an assault specialist for muscle and a tracking specialist for locating targets. Meanwhile, the third member can be for support, whether it's medical or long range, I explains. Forgive me, Lord Raikage. But can you explain more about why, for this team placement? Inara asked. According to Academy reports, Naruto Yatsuki, Samui Shirioku, and Yugito Ni are the prime candidates for this year's Rookie of the Year. There are 4 Genins among the chosen 9 that have sensory abilities. One will be distributed to each team, while one team will have the advantage of having 2. I explains. 4. I understand Ku, Kanari, and the Eagle Boy, but who's the 4th sensor? Asked Darui. That will be Naruto Yatsuki. I will say no more regarding his skills, as you will soon find out for yourself, Darui, but during his training sessions with B and me, I can safely say he's a talented sensor and a capable ninjutsu specialist. I says before he continues. The others will be placed in other teams. Samui will be in B's team with her brother and Karui, I says with a bit of pride in his voice before explaining where everyone else will be. Forgive me again, Lord Raikage, but I can't help but feel like I got the short end of the stick here, Anara asked dejectedly, as she didn't get neither of the three strongest in this year's Genin graduates. She still very much prefers to have Samui on her team, and to train her bloodline. I'm sorry you feel that way, Anara. But don't sell your students short yet. Ku is reported to be the third best male shinobi, and Ranagi has one of the best taijutsu skills in their class. With your guidance, I believe they can be a formidable genjutsu specialist like you. I says. I see, Anara simply says, still feeling a little dejected. But the idea of having her own genjutsu apprentice lifted her spirits. She always believed that the art of genjutsu has always been underrated among shinobis. And she would be more than happy to pass on her knowledge to the next generation. If there are no other questions, you are all dismissed, I says to the four Jonins in front of him. As they are all about to leave, one of them decides to stay and asks the Raikage a question. Raikage-sama, can I have a word with you for a moment? Darui asked his old sensei. Very well, Darui. The rest of you can leave. I says as everyone else has cleared the room. I'll get to the point. Not that I have anything against Naruto or anything. I mean, I heard he's a really good kid. But I was actually looking forward to teaching Samui about her bloodline. Besides, Samui is probably a censor already, given which clan she is from. Darui explained. I understand your reasons, Darui. At another time, I would very much agree with you. But it seems that you still do not know much about Omoi or your future students. I says before he continues. Samui is from the Shiryoku clan, yes, but according to the reports I received from her father in the academy, her skills in sensory are still unexplored, and she is more interested in combat than tracking. Probably from Naruto's influence, I added with a chuckle. Omoi might not be from any clan, but during his time in the academy, but he's effective when it comes to quick thinking and overall analyzing the situation. I said confidently. Naruto, on the other hand, is a highly capable censor and combat shinobi. And with Naruto and Yugito's enthusiastic energy, I am confident they will be able to help motivate Omoi. And from what I heard, these three work very well together. I'm sure they will surprise you. I says. If you feel strongly about this Raikage-sama, I'll give it a shot. But I'm not going to pull my punches with Naruto, just so you know. If the rumors about him are true, I don't think I have the luxury of doing so. He was your apprentice, after all. Darui says with a smile as he vanishes in a dark lightning. Back to Academy, C's classroom. C is now standing before the Genin hopefuls, as he has already listed out the first 6 teams. It was until the 7th that Naruto and his friends had finally paid attention. Next up is Team 7. Samui Shiryoku, Atsui Shiryoku, and Karui. Samui sighed in disappointment at not being on the same team as Naruto, but it didn't bother her that much. At that moment, she decided to have a long conversation with her teammates to learn how well they could work together and to analyze every weak and strong spot. Team 9 is still currently active. Now on to Team 10. Naruto Yatsuki. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Every fangirl was sitting on the edge of their seats. The class was dead silent. Any noise made was instantly hushed by their angry glares. They were holding on to their breaths like they had forgotten to breathe. Omoi. Naruto was actually happy that he got to team up with his disastrous best friend. He and Omoi high-fived each other after a small woohoo from Naruto, while the disastrous Omoi still looked drowsy but was still paying attention to the team placement. And Yugito ni. The class was dead silent once again. All the fangirls cried out as Samui grinned in satisfaction. Yugito slowly turns her head to look at the handsome blonde sitting beside her, with her mouth still slightly open. He looks back at her with a happy smile. Naruto was thrilled that he got to be on the same team with not only his best friend but his, maybe, girlfriend too. That's great, right, Yugito-chan? You, me, and Naruto doesn't finish his sentences. Yugito suddenly grabs him by the collar and pulls him in for a kiss on the lips. She just couldn't take it anymore. Everyone, not just the fangirls, everyone was completely shocked by the sudden public display of affection. Yugito then broke the kiss between them, leaving a blushing mess Naruto in a state of shock and confusion. Yugito, Naruto asks with the blush never leaving his face. What? All the fangirls yell out in unison. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Fangirls' hopes were crushed. It is hysterical. I need to remind myself to thank Yugito later, Karui thought with a smirk. Disastrous blondes, Omoi thought with a satisfied smirk. Was Naruto-san and Yugito-san's relationship a secret? I find that doubtful, Ku thought with his logic. I'm just surprised she didn't do that sooner, Atsui thought as he continued to eat his breakfast. What the hell is happening in my class here? C asks no one in particular in his mind. Okay, that concludes teams 1 to 10. Now we'll move on to teams 11 to 15. C says, trying to move on from the very awkward situation of his favorite student being kissed by the cat girl. But nobody paid further attention to the scarred Chunin anymore, as the girls glared angrily at Yugito while some of the boys were glaring with looks of jealousy at Naruto. Samui smiled in triumph. She wouldn't mind kissing Naruto as Yugito did, but she wasn't much into showing affection in public. Every adventure they will have, and every danger they will face together because they will always be together. Later, following their Jonin, Team 10 soon found themselves on top of the roof. Darui was sitting in a chair, and across him was a bench where Naruto, Omoi, and Yugito sat down. Well, before we start, my name is Darui, and my specialty is Black Lightning. I like to work for my village. I'm an S-rank shinobi, and my job is quite dull. Now your turn, Darui said, pointing at Omoi. The three new genins weren't sure what to think of him. He sounded quite dull. But Omoi figured he might as well tell him everything. My name is Omoi, my specialty is kenjutsu, and lazing around with no purpose in life. I like to help my friends, and I dislike assholes. My favorite food is ice cream. My best friends are Naruto and Yugito. I hope one day to become a worthy man to make my father proud. Omoi explained, with a grim look, on his lollipop. Darui figured the son of Daishin would become a kenjutsu warrior. Good shinobi, terrible father, Darui thought. His eyes slowly turned to Yugito. Your turn, blonde. Me. Both Naruto and Yugito said. The girl won, Darui added. My name is Yugito ni. My favorite food is sushi. I dislike bad people, but most people who can't tell the difference between water and the glass holding the water. My dearest friends are Naruto, Samui, and Omoi. My dream is one day to become the best kunoichi in the world. Yugito said, punching the air in the end. Not bad for a girl of her age. Becoming the best kunoichi requires a lot of effort, though. I hope she has the will, Darui thought before pointing his index finger at Naruto. Since these two have mentioned your name in their intros, I assume you're Naruto, Darui said as he pointed to his blonde male student. That's right. I'm Naruto Yatsuki. I like training, ramen, and hanging out with my friends. I dislike those who judge a book by its cover and those who hurt people that are precious to me. My hobbies are training as well, most of the time with I-sensei, my father, and also learning new jutsus. My dream is to become the greatest Kage. So I can achieve my true goal, which is to bring true peace to the shinobi world. Naruto said with his bright smile. This kid sure aims high. Even I can tell that his true goal is near impossible. But if Raikage believes in him, I guess I should just make sure that he's on the right path. But that doesn't mean I don't need some convincing myself. Darui thought. Alright, guys, now that everyone has already introduced themselves, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're not technically genin yet, Darui informed them. What do you mean, Darui-sensei? We passed the exams and everything. How are we not genin yet? Yugito asked. Well, for starters, the academy exams, or just a way to test if you can perform the basics and fundamentals and weed out those who cannot. If you can't, then you don't deserve to wear these headbands. The real exam is with me. And if you should fail, this team will be disbanded, and you will be sent back to the academy. Darui said with a cold tone. Whaat. That's insane, sensei. Yugito yelled out. No. It's not. You're going to become a ninja, and as a ninja, you will represent the strength of our village. Many of your senior shinobi, including myself, had to work very hard to establish our reputation of being the strongest of the 5 great hidden villages. We can't just make any of you kids genin if you can't perform the simplest things in order to survive in the shinobi world. People get killed easily when they are unprepared, and I'll be damned if I let you guys get killed under my watch. So that is why we will have our test tomorrow. Darui said with a serious tone. He's right, Yugito-chan. If we are not ready, it will be irresponsible for sensei to let us become shinobi. Naruto informed his girlfriend with a gentle tone. Naruto-kun? Yugito asked in disbelief at what he had just said. Well, I'm glad at least one of you is the responsible one. Darui said with a smirk. Oh, don't underestimate me, sensei. We will pass that test. We worked very hard, too, just to get to where we are now, and it will be a damn waste to be stopped by you when we are so close. We have our own goals, and it all starts here. We will show you that we do have what it takes to be a shinobi of Kumo. Naruto said with a burning determination in his eyes. The kid's eyes just screamed determination. I guess Reikage wasn't kidding about the whole, born special, thing. Darui thought with a smile for his blonde charge. Naruto-kun, Yugito thought with a blush, as she was once again inspired by his words. HMPH, typical Naruto, Omoi thought with a smirk. Naruto always knew what to say when it came to motivating him. Well, I'm looking forward to it already. Darui said. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Oh, and, make sure you bring your A game because I won't be going easy on you guys. I want you all to be the best, so let's see if you can handle against the best. Darui said. When Darui left, Omoi went straight home to train on his kenjutsu after saying his goodbyes to the blonde pair while Naruto decided to walk Yugito home, but she suggested they stop by at his home first to have a little talk. As they continued to walk to his apartment, Naruto remembered what he had said about his dream to his team earlier, and several things popped into his head. Naruto didn't mention about his other important goals. The next day, Training Ground 10. It was now 8:30 a.m., and Naruto was the first to arrive at the training ground. Eventually, he was joined by the ever-so-eager Yugito and the drowsy yet slightly motivated Omoi. Darui had finally arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, just like he said he would. Well, I'm glad you guys are punctual. I'm even more impressed that Omoi is still awake. Darui said. Blame these two. They keep yapping in my ear that I have to focus now and sleep later. Omoi said with a lazy tone. Hey, it worked, didn't it? Naruto said. Yeah, stop complaining, Omoi. When we pass, you can sleep for as long as you want. Yugito added confidently. Quite confident, aren't you? And we haven't even started yet. Darui said with a smirk. Well, you need to have the right attitude. Otherwise, what's the point? Naruto said with his own smirk. Ha, can't disagree, kiddo. Now, I hope you guys are ready. This will be a survival test. Darui said with a serious tone. Survival test? Why you're not going to kill us, are you, sensei? Yugito asks fearfully. No. Well, I might maim or badly injure you, but no, I won't kill you. Darui said with a not so convincing tone. Any rules of engagement? Naruto asked with a serious tone. You three are to take me down within 1 hour, Darui said as he placed a large clock on a wooden pillar. If the clock rings at 10, and I'm still standing, you fail. Give up. You fail. I defeat all three of you. You fail. Darui informed them with a cold tone that sent shivers down the three genins' spines. Yikes, and here I thought Naruto-kun was a hard-ass teacher. Yugito thought with a slight fear. I advise you to come at me with the intention to kill. It's the only way if you are ever going to land a scratch on me. Darui said. But sensei, what if we hurt you? Yugito asked. Ha ha ha, kid, I'm an S-rank shinobi. And I have been one for years. I fought many tough sons of bitches when I was already your age. Now I won't say that you guys definitely won't stand a chance against me, but if it makes you feel any better, rest assured that I can take anything you throw at me. Darui said with a smirk. The three then nodded in agreement. Now, begin. Darui announced as he set the alarm on the clock. Yugito wasted no time and started her attack first. Fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu. She then blew out multiple blue fireballs toward the elite Jonin. The fire attack looked like it hit him dead on, and the ground exploded on impact. Yugito had a satisfied smirk on her face, but it soon faded when she saw her target was nothing but a burned log. Darui then suddenly appeared behind the Genin trio. Not bad. The fire could use a little bit more power, but like I said, not bad. Let's see if you can handle mine. Darui said as he formed several hand seals. Fire style. Dragon Flame Bomb. Darui blew out a powerful stream of fire toward the Genin trio. Naruto then performed several hand seals and placed both his hands in front of him. Water style. Water wall. A large wall of water suddenly exploded and appeared out of thin air, surrounding Naruto and his team, which caused the elite Jonin to raise an eyebrow in surprise due to the fact that the nearest water source was on the opposite side of the training ground. The exploding fire collided with the powerful water wall, which caused a large amount of steam to be released. What the hell was that? I didn't see him spew out any water from his mouth. The water wall just came out of thin air. But that's impossible, right? Who is this kid? Darui thought with wonder. Darui's thoughts were broken when he saw Naruto perform a set of new hand seals that he was very familiar with. Darui then made the exact same hand seals as Naruto, and they both took a deep breath. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Darui and the Yotsuki blew out an equally powerful amount of wind toward each other, canceling each jutsus out. The wind instantly blew all the steam away that was covering the area. Water and wind affinity, huh? That's a pretty rare combination in Kumo, let alone the land of lightning. And those jutsus he used were quite powerful. No doubt that this kid has already taken chakra control training. Darui thought with a proud smirk. Not bad, Naruto. I can see Raikage's training has really paid off. Darui said. Darui then noticed a wind blade was suddenly approaching him. Out of instinct and years of experience, he was able to jump out of the way before being hit by Omoi. I see. That's quite an impressive strategy, you guys. You use the steam as cover, so Omoi can sneak behind me to catch me with his wind blade. And the fact I didn't see nor hear any of you verbally communicate, I assume you're using sign language. Darui said with a confident smirk. Damn it, he caught us. All three Genins thought. While I admit you guys are pretty good, but I'm just getting started. So now let's test out your tracking skills, shall we? Darui said before performing several hand seals. Wind style. Dust storm jutsu. Darui blows out a stream of a high-velocity wind containing dust particles to the ground below him, using it as a smokescreen to disappear into the woods. Disastrous, we almost had him. Now he's gone. Omoi thought. Don't worry about that, Omoi. That was a good plan, but what did we expect from a Jonin? Naruto said. I guess. This test was already disastrous from the start. He could be anywhere right now. Omoi said. Don't worry about it, Omoi. Whiskers got it covered. Yugito said with a smile. Please stop calling me that, Yugito-chan, Naruto said with a tired sigh. Oh, don't pout. It's cute, and that name suits you. Yugito said with a giggle. Guys, as much as I like to hear you two squabble like an old married couple, I rather not hear it right now, Omoi said with a deadpan look. Sorry, Omoi, both Naruto and Yugito said in unison. Naruto then knelt down and placed his index finger on the floor, and closed his eyes to concentrate on locating their Jonin-sensei. Darui, who was seeing this from not too far away from the Genin trio, raised his eyebrow once more in surprise when he saw Naruto perform his sensing jutsu. Naruto snapped his eyes open and snapped his head towards Darui's direction, which caused the elite Jonin's eyes to widen by surprise as the blonde Yatsuki had actually found him. Multi-lightning clone jutsu. Naruto created around 30 clones and had them form into a straight line, facing Darui's direction. They then formed several identical hand seals and took a deep breath. This doesn't look good, Darui said, with a little sweat drop on his head. Wind style. Vacuum bullets barrage. All the clones yell out in unison. The clones then fired multiple bullets of high-velocity sharp wind towards the tree line Darui was located. Many of the trees were being torn to shreds. When the dust settled, all is left was a trail of complete destruction. The clones were then dispelled once the attack was over. Damn Naruto-kun, what did the trees ever do to you? Yugito said with a little bit of awe in her voice. It's much better than you shooting your fireballs at a wooden area. We'll have a forest fire in our hands before you know it, Naruto said with a smirk, but the smirk immediately disappeared when they felt a chakra signature beneath them. Earth style. Headhunter jutsu. Suddenly a hand snapped out from the ground, and grabbed Yugito by her ankle, and dragged her underneath, leaving only her head visible. What the? Get me out of here! Yugito yelled out. Darui then appeared out of the ground and gave the knee a smirk for being caught off guard so easily. Multiple wind blades. Omoi sent out multiple wind blades, trying to hurt Darui once more, but the elite Jonin was too fast and managed to jump out of the way. Darui then threw a kunai at Omoi, who dodged the incoming projectile. Darui then suddenly appeared behind Omoi and chopped the back of his neck, knocking him out unconscious. The elite Jonin then turns to look at his last standing student. It's just you and me now, Naruto. And you know the rule. If you're out, everyone is out, Darui said with a cold tone. Darui then charged at Naruto with great speed, and the two were engaged in an intense taijutsu fight. Naruto's wing fist was formidable against Darui's Dark Panther stance. The blonde genin was proven much faster than the elite Jonin and was able to land a couple of hard jabs on him. But Darui still had size and strength on his side. Naruto realized that fighting against Darui in taijutsu would waste a lot of time and energy, so he decided to create as much distance as possible. He kicked away from Darui and made several hand seals. Water style. Liquid bullet. Naruto spat out an enormous and powerful orb of water toward the elite Jonin, which he narrowly avoided. The water orb completely obliterated the tree behind Darui. That liquid bullet could break every bone in my body if I didn't dodge it. How strong is this kid's water affinity? Darui wonders. Naruto then took out a single kunai and channeled lightning chakra into it, and threw it toward Darui. Huh, he can channel lightning chakra into his weapons too. It's like this kid is tailor-made to be my stew. Darui didn't get to finish his thought as he saw Naruto make several hand seals, and Darui's eyes widened as he knew that jutsu very well. Ninja art. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. The lightning-enhanced kunai suddenly multiplied into hundreds, which caused the Jonin to sweat a bit. Damn it, Raikage. Why did you teach him that jutsu? This kid is smart. I'll give him that. He's targeting all my blind spots. Dodging is impossible, and taking cover is out of the question. One thing left to do then. Darui thought as he made several hand seals. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Darui blew out a powerful gust of wind and blew all the lightning-enhanced kunais away before any could hit him. Darui was taking a deep breath to regain some of the lost air he had just released, but when he turned around, Naruto was gone, along with Yugito and Omoi. Ha ha ha, that kid is something else, Darui said, impressed by Naruto's abilities. 15 minutes left till 10 a.m. The genin trio were sitting by a large branch and were panting heavily as they were able to get as much distance from Darui. Thanks, Naruto, you really saved us back there, Omoi said. Why yeah, I'm sorry I was caught off guard. It won't happen again, Yugito said, looking down in shame. It's fine, guys. Don't worry about it, but we need to come up with another plan soon. We have 15 minutes left, and any plan we make will be our last shot. Fighting Darui-sensei in a taijutsu match is a lost cause, and he can counter most of my ninjutsus. Not to mention, he's fully aware of your wind blade techniques and knows how to defend himself against them. Naruto informed his team. So what do we do, Naruto-kun? Yugito asked. If we are going beat him, we have to do it together. As for how I was hoping you could figure it out. Naruto turns to Omoi. Huh, disastrous, give me 2 minutes, Omoi said with a confident smirk. Back with Darui 8 minutes till 10 a.m. Darui is now standing in a large clearing. The hour is almost up, so he might as well make it a little easier for the genin trio to find him. It seems my little genins are still nowhere to be found. And here I was hoping they might. Darui didn't get to finish his sentence as he heard Yugito's voice come out from one of the branches. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Yugito blew out multiple fireballs toward Darui. This again. Nice try, but. Darui then saw Naruto perform several hand seals next to Yugito. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Naruto blew out a large gust of air toward the fireballs, increasing their size, speed, and firepower. Collaboration jutsu. Shit. Darui said. Darui used his head, hunter jutsu, to escape the powerful inferno. Naruto then jumped into the dark and still scorching clearing and placed his index finger on the hot ground to locate his sensei. His eyes snapped open when he felt Darui was below him. He quickly jumps up high in the air to avoid the ground ascending Darui from catching him. As Naruto was still in the air, he made several hand seals. Water style. Raging waves. Naruto shot out an enormous torrent of water from his mouth toward Darui, which he narrowly avoided. However, the water stream was still chasing after him on the scorched ground, causing a large amount of steam to emerge. Darui was so distracted by the violent water stream that he didn't even realize that a shinobi was slowly approaching him. Naruto's jutsu eventually ended, and Darui stopped his running and was about to charge at Naruto in the now steamy environment. But suddenly, his body went in full alarm when Omoi used his most powerful sword attack. Mirror Blade. Darui jumped upwards, expecting a slash attack, when a rough gust of wind slammed against him from every direction. His eyes widened when he felt blood on his shoulder. To think that kid can use an A-rank jutsu, Darui thought, surprised. Water style. Liquid Bullet. Naruto spat out a large orb of water toward Darui at a fast speed. Darui narrowly jumps out of the way of the powerful water orb. When the mist water orb collided and destroyed the tree behind Darui, the alarm had finally run off. Shocking the trio, they realized that they had run out of time. It was a moment of silence for the genin trio as they looked down in disappointment. They had failed to defeat Darui within 1 hour. Naruto, Yugito, and Omoi are now standing before Darui with very disappointed looks on their faces. That was a very clever plan, you guys. You two intentionally scorched the earth beneath me to darken the ground surface with your collaboration jutsu. Then Naruto draws me out and uses his water style to cause as much steam as possible to perfectly hide Omoi's sword technique, allowing Naruto to go in with the finishing blow. Darui summarizes their original plan. It was all Omoi's idea. We just did our part. Naruto said with a little dejected tone. Don't sell yourself short, kiddo. You three worked very well together. Darui said with a proud smile. Well, I guess we'll try to be better next year. Omoi said with his dejected tone. Why next year? You guys aren't thinking of slacking out on me for the whole year, are you? Darui asked with a smirk. What? Yugito asked, slightly confused. Oh, I'm sorry, guess I wasn't clear, you all pass, Darui said with a proud smirk. WHAAAAT. I mean, WHAAAT. Yugito yelled out in disbelief. Not to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I thought we failed. Naruto asked. Ha ha ha, what was the test called again? Darui asked the Genin trio. Survival test. Yugito answered. Exactly. This test was for me to determine if you are ready to be a shinobi. I needed to see your level of skills, intelligence, and most importantly, teamwork. Darui explained. But you said we needed to take you down within 1 hour. Naruto reminded. Yes, I did. But I didn't say you needed to take me down within 1 hour, to pass, did I? Darui said with a smirk. Chiki-sensei, the Genin trio thought with a deadpan look at Darui. Ha ha ha, look, overall, you three performed excellently today. But it wasn't perfect. You obviously need more training, which is good, because that is what I am here for. Omoi, your intelligence is, without a doubt, impressive. But your taijutsu skills are almost non-existent, and we really need to work on your chakra reserves if you are going to last long in a fight. Darui said to Omoi. More training. Disastrous. Omoi said with a tired sigh. Yugito, you still need to work on your chakra control. The phoenix flower you used is strong, but it is still not living up to its fullest potential. If we can improve your control, your fire jutsus will be effortless and less chakra draining. Plus, my fourth affinity is fire, so I can teach you some new jutsus once you master your control. Plus, it is best if we also train your sensory abilities. You can't always rely on your boyfriend, right? Darui asked with a smirk, which caused Yugito to blush in embarrassment. And now, Naruto, I have to admit, the Raikage really wasn't kidding about you. You impressed me the most, kiddo. Your taijutsu, ninjutsu, chakra control, and even your unique sensory ability are above Chunin level already. And thanks to your large chakra reserves, you are practicing this team's powerhouse. But let's use this time to improve your strategy and tactical skills. While you are proven intelligent and know how to think on your feet, having a strategic mindset would prove very beneficial for someone like you in the future. Darui said. Well, if I want to become Raikage, I guess I need to be more like Omoi. I just hope I don't catch his laziness, Naruto said with a smirk at his friend. Disastrous blonde, Omoi said with a smile. I take offense to that, by the way, Yugito said with a deadpan look. After officially becoming Genin of Kumo, Naruto couldn't remember the last time he had been so happy. This of course needed celebrating. He invited Omoi and Yugito to eat together in a bar, or restaurant. He had invited his other friends, but Atsui had said he needed something to do in his house. Karui said she was too tired. Omoi kindly refused, saying his father wanted him in the house. Before hour 2100, the blonde couple frowned, knowing how strict Omoi's father was, but their friend quickly said that everything was fine, and there were no problems between him and his father. Something they both knew he was lying about. After saying good night to him, Samui made her way to the designated meeting spot with a confident stride. Naruto and Yugito eagerly awaited her arrival, knowing that the beautiful Kunoichi had worked just as hard as they had to earn her place among their ranks. Samui had proven multiple times to be the best of the new Kunoichis in Kumo. The only reason Yugito was stronger was because of being Jinchuriki of Two Tails Cat. Samui always won whenever the fight was without using Matabi's chakra, but Samui had told Naruto that she would soon surpass Yugito. Her father was teaching her a new jutsu that involved her bloodline. After meeting, they started discussing what they needed to do to pass their sensei's challenge. What did you do to pass? Yugito asked curiously as she tilted her head to the side. Naruto didn't know why, but he had a bad feeling, and his feelings were proven right when Samui groaned loudly. Okay. What did my uncle do now? He inquired with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He knew all too well that his beloved uncle had a penchant for doing silly things that occasionally bordered on the absurd. It was a trait that both amused and worried Naruto, as he never knew what to expect from his zany relative, and knowing Samui, she didn't like wasting her time and, in general, hated doing things that, according to her, were pointless and weren't fruitful towards a goal. He told us in order to pass, all of us need to write a good enough song and sing to him, and if he thinks our song was good, we will pass. She spoke through tightly clenched teeth, her eyes narrowing and twitching with an intensity that could only be described as a seething desire to kill someone. It was as though the very air around her had become charged with electric energy, crackling with a barely contained rage that threatened to spill over at any moment. A gaze colder than the snow on top of the twin mountains. Naruto attempted to stifle his giggles, determined to maintain his composure despite his utmost effort. He failed to contain his laughter, causing his body to convulse with mirth as he struggled to catch his breath. Meanwhile, Yugito made no attempt to suppress her own amusement, her eyes sparkling with merriment as she let out a hearty chortle that echoed throughout the area. Her laughter was so infectious that it drew the attention of passers-by, who paused in confusion to observe the source of the commotion, wondering what was wrong with them. Samui growled, feeling humiliated. Her favorite blonde always told her that her uncle had a few screws loose, but now Samui was sure that B-sensei had the entire brain loose. When B had told them what their goal was, Samui was certain that he was either messing with them or there was a hidden meaning behind it. When she realized that he was actually being honest, it had taken everything for Samui not to use her Kekkei Genkei on him. After she stopped laughing, Yugito took a deep breath to calm herself when a coy smile formed on her face as she leaned closer to Samui as they walked through the streets of Kumo. Oh no, Naruto thought, knowing Samui's patience was running low and not counting Yugito's teasing. Samui, can we please hear you sing? Yugito pleaded, smacking her hands together in front of her chest in a pleading manner. Samui slowly turned to look at her with a murderous look, almost like she was trying hard not to slap Yugito across the face. Knowing he needed to intervene before Samui started anything, he got in between the two girls, separating them from one another. How about I pay for everything tonight? We just graduated, so I really want all of us to eat whatever we want. Naruto offered a warm smile towards the cold girl, hoping his smile would melt the ice around her cold heart. Samui tried to hide her rosy cheeks behind her locks. Yugito and Naruto couldn't help but notice the faint blush that adorned her face, enhancing her already captivating features. Yugito brought her arm around Naruto's waist. If I didn't know any better, I'd think you were asking us out, Naruto-kun. Yugito teased with a slight flush to her cheeks as she said it. A certain biju in her head was telling her to pounce him right there in the middle of the streets. Well, I wouldn't mind going on a date with two beautiful girls, Naruto said with a charming smile, his arms around their shoulders. Samui was as tall as Naruto, and Yugito was slightly shorter than him. Both girls blushed at the thought. Despite her natural cold gaze, Samui couldn't stop herself from getting excited at the thought of going on a date with Naruto. Me neither, Naruto-kun, Samui answered. She slyly leaned in towards Naruto, hugging his arm tightly and pressing it against the warm valley of her S. Naruto's cheeks immediately flushed with embarrassment and arousal as he felt the softness of her bosom against his skin. Meanwhile, Samui couldn't help but smirk deviously as she watched her favorite blonde struggle to keep his composure. She had caught him looking at her quite often, something that excited her. The Nibi Jinchuriki purred as she latched onto Naruto's arm, dragging him and Samui across the streets of Kumo. After sitting down in the restaurant on a large street, there were over 50 tables, and all of them were full. Someone walked up to them to get their order. Samui noticed the woman serving had a small scar just under her chin. She noticed with a keen eye that the majority of the customers were the new generation of genin. However, even amidst the sea of young faces, she couldn't help but notice a few jonins here and there, their seasoned presence adding a sense of depth and maturity to the dynamic mix of patrons that filled the lively space. Yugito ordered sushi, Naruto ordered ramen, and Samui ordered chicken s. After getting their orders, the three blondes talked about the upcoming missions they would do a week later. Since they had just graduated, they had a free week before they officially started doing missions for Kumo. Samui quickly added that their first missions were probably D-rank missions, to chase cats and stuff like that. Shouldn't those missions go to those in the academy? Yugito asked, a little confused. She leaned her cheek onto the palm of her hand, her eyes still fixed on Samui, who was sitting near the window with Naruto in the middle. Yugito was sitting on Naruto's left. Yugito noticed the way Samui was holding Naruto's hand under the table, their fingers intertwined. She smirked, knowing she wanted to be one step ahead of this race. Unlike Konoha and Suma, Kumo, Kiri, and Iwa trained the students who were still in the academy on completing harmless D missions. This was done to get them used to the process of missions and to earn money, but those D missions were mainly done by civilian students who needed extra money to pay the academy, and the D missions were an excellent way for them to earn some money and make it easier. D missions gave them enough money for the academy and some extra for other stuff. Despite completing multiple D missions during the academy years, they still needed to complete 15 D missions before having the opportunity to complete their first C missions. And to complete their first B mission, they needed to complete around 20 C missions unless the team hired had very good genins and the Raikage deemed them good enough to start B missions. As the blonde trio kept talking, they heard two Jonins talking from a nearby table. Have you heard what is happening in Kurigakure? What? Apparently, after the Mizukage started slaughtering people with bloodlines around his village, those left are leading a revolution against the Mizukage. Leading the revolution is Mei Terumi. She's said to be in pair with Tsunade Senju. A few Jonins near Naruto's table spoke in hushed tones. Naruto frowned upon hearing that. It was public knowledge that Yagura was the Jinchuriki of the Three Tails Turtle. Without hesitation, his hand moved to her shoulder, rubbing it gently in a comforting gesture, hoping to alleviate her worries and make her feel better. The warmth of his touch and the sincerity in his eyes conveyed a sense of empathy, and it was evident that he truly cared about her well-being. She looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips, knowing how much she hated hearing that Yagura was slaughtering his own people and giving Jinchurikis around the world a bad reputation. After a few minutes of excited chatter, the waitress finally arrived, expertly balancing a tray of steaming hot bowls. As she placed the dishes in front of them, Naruto's eyes widened with anticipation, and the aroma of the rich broth and savory toppings filled his senses. The steam rising from the bowl was like a siren's call, beckoning him to take a sip, and he couldn't help but almost drool at the mouth-watering scent. Yugito's eyes widened with delight at the sight of the plate full of sushi placed before her. She couldn't resist the temptation to indulge in the colorful and flavorful delicacies that lay before her. As she picked up a piece of the perfectly rolled sushi with her chopsticks, she could feel her mouth watering in anticipation. With a delicate touch, she brought the sushi to her mouth, savoring the flavors as they exploded on her tongue. Yugito's rose lips parted in a satisfied smile as she ate them, thoroughly enjoying the delectable meal in front of her. As the savory aroma of grilled chicken wafted through the air, Samui reached for a wet napkin and wiped her hands clean, eagerly anticipating the plate of succulent chicken that was about to be presented before her. With each passing moment, her mouth watered in anticipation of the juicy meat, and she couldn't wait to sink her teeth into the tender flesh. Thank you for coming here, she said, her voice filled with sincerity and appreciation. As she walked away, she turned back and added, I hope you enjoy the food, with a touch of enthusiasm and eagerness. Naruto eagerly grabbed two sleek chopsticks from the container on the table. With a quick F of his wrist, he deftly twirled the chopsticks in his hand as he eagerly awaited the arrival of his steaming hot bowl of noodles. Meanwhile, Samui had her thin knife and fork poised in her perfectly manicured hands. As she sliced through the tender strips of meat on her plate, she made sure to do so with the utmost care, gracefully lifting each piece to her mouth with the utmost precision, careful not to make a mess of her impeccable outfit. Yugito, on the other hand, didn't really care if she was making a mess while eating sushi. She didn't mind if soy sauce dripped down her chin or if bits of rice stuck to her fingertips. Yugito went through plate after plate of sushi like he was going through ramen, and Naruto stood there in awe and horror for his poor wallet as he did. Yugito, be careful, you might choke with the speed you are eating, Samui said, shaking her head while chewing a piece of meat. When she was done eating, she reached out for a wet napkin and gently wiped her mouth, lips, and hands to ensure that not a single crumb or stain remained on her skin. She then picked up a crystal clear glass filled with refreshing water and took a long, satisfying sip, feeling the cool liquid flowing down her throat and reinvigorating her senses. It's my favorite food, Samui, so shut it, Yugito said, annoyed, as she finished off another plate of food. Samui rolled her eyes before noticing that Naruto had finished his ramen. She was still holding his hand under the table. Samui couldn't help but feel the anticipation building up inside her as she stole a quick glance at Naruto, her heart racing at the sight of his charming smile. With no one else in the restaurant paying them any attention, she leaned closer to him, their legs touching ever so slightly, sending shivers down her spine. As she shifted her weight, she couldn't help but notice the way her short pants hugged her curves, accentuating her long, beautiful legs and adding to the attraction that she knew was already building between them. As Naruto's hand trembled against Samui's skin, he could feel his heart pounding against his ribs, threatening to burst from his chest with the intensity of his emotions. With a gentle yet firm touch, Samui guided his hand to the soft flesh between her thighs, igniting a fire within Naruto that he had never felt before. He felt his stirring up. As his breathing rapid, his hand slowly and delicately explored Samui's toned legs, relishing every curve and contour. His fingers traced the length of her thigh, feeling the softness of her skin beneath his touch. Samui reciprocated the desire by reaching for his hardness through his pants, gently squeezing and teasing him with her touch. As he gazed into Samui's eyes, a mischievous smirk played across his lips, and he slowly, almost teasingly, ran his fingers along the hem of her short pants. Samui's breath hitched in anticipation, the heat rising between them as she felt his fingers slip under the fabric and graze against her skin. The sensation sent shivers down her spine, causing her to arch into him as she surrendered to the pleasure he was giving her. She could feel how soaked and eager she was for him, her panties damp with desire as he slipped his fingers inside her folds. Samui struggled to maintain her composure, her teeth sinking into her lower lip with a desperate effort to stifle the S that threatened to escape her lips, her eyes closing tightly as she surrendered herself to the delicious sensations that washed over her like a tidal wave. As Naruto's skilled fingers worked their magic inside her, Samui's body was consumed by a wave of unbridled pleasure that left her trembling with ecstasy. She could feel herself getting closer and closer to the ultimate release, and Naruto was determined to push her over the edge. Despite the risk of being caught by the other diners in the restaurant, Samui couldn't help but revel in the moment's thrill. The thought of being caught only added to the intense passion that was building inside her, and she found herself getting even more aroused by the possibility of being discovered. Every touch, every caress, and every movement of Naruto's fingers sent shivers down her spine and made her heart race with anticipation. She leaned her head against his shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his body and the steady rise and fall of his chest. With her hand resting on the bulge of his pants, she could feel his growing excitement, and she began to rub it up and down, her touch sending shivers down his spine. As she edged softly, her mouth near his ear, she felt a rush of desire and intimacy, as if they were the only two people in the world. Naruto felt a shiver throughout his body at the way his name rolled off her tongue before she bit his earlobe softly. After 5 minutes of his fingers playing with her hand, Samui closed her mouth with her hand to stop herself from screaming out in pleasure in the middle of a packed restaurant. Naruto pulled out his hand soaked in her juice. She grabbed his hand before wringing his fingers clean, testing herself on them. After Yugito finished her meal, Naruto tried to pay for everything, but Samui insisted that she pay half. The Nibi Jinchuriki, of course, had noticed what her favorite blondes had done under the table. Are you seriously allowing Samui to beat you? I know what you want. You know what you want. Just find a hotel and ride him until tomorrow morning. Matabi whispered with a wide grin on Yugito's head. Yugito couldn't help but imagine herself on all four, Naruto behind her, taking her from behind while Samui forced her face between her thighs. Yugito blushed furiously at the thought of sleeping with two of her favorite blondes. She couldn't help but her lips at the thought. Samui's heart raced as she stepped out of the restaurant, smiling from ear to ear. The taste of the savory meal she just had was still lingering in her mouth, but what truly made her smile was the thought of the mind-blowing orgasm that Naruto had given her just moments ago, leaving her in a state of pure ecstasy. As the cool night air hit her face, she closed her eyes and let out a contented sigh. Her face was glowing, and he only used his fingers. She couldn't wait to see what more he could give her. Both Samui and Yugito were holding Naruto's hands. You're quite good friends, it seems, they both heard a voice. Turning to their right, they were met with the hard face of A, who stood tall with a grin on his face. A-sama, Yugito spoke immediately before bowing respectfully in front of him. Naruto, on the other hand, just furrowed a brow. What do you want, old man? The blonde asked with a cheeky grin, knowing he didn't need to talk with his father respectfully. A groaned loudly at his disrespectful son before grabbing him by the shoulder. Show some respect, brat. You have no manners. A said with a groan before he placed a rough and calloused hand on the top of Naruto's head, ruffling his hair in a gesture of both affection and annoyance. Hey, stop it, old man. Naruto cried out, trying to escape his death grip. Samui and Yugito giggled at the way A-sama was acting with Naruto. Despite being known as the second strongest shinobi of Kumo, it seemed to had a soft side. A soon let go of his son, who was rubbing the top of his head while glaring at his father. You can say that Samui and Yugito are quite good friends, Naruto spoke. A nodded, knowing that his son was quite close with the two girls. Originally he had wanted Naruto to be on a team with Samui and her brother, but B had suggested changing it, saying only Darui could train Naruto on how to train on his purple lightning. I just wanted to check on you. Tomorrow I need you at home by 9 a.m. Yugito, B said he needs to train you tomorrow at first light. A's voice changed from casual to serious in a second. Naruto furrowed a brow. Knowing this was serious, he turned to his friends. See you later, father, Naruto said warmly as soon as he left in a lightning bolt. I need to go. Good night, Naruto-kun. Yugito, who felt bolder, grabbed his tunic, smashing her lips with his. Naruto felt Yugito's soft lips pressing against his. He couldn't help but feel his brain go into overdrive as his senses were overwhelmed by the pleasure of her tongue dancing with his. Her fingers ran through his hair, sending shivers down his spine, as he pulled her closer to him, feeling her curves pressed against his body. Naruto and Yugito were lost in their passion, their bodies entwined, their breaths coming in short gasps as they explored each other's mouths. And when Naruto's hands found their way to Yugito's ample backside, he couldn't help but grin as he felt her, the sound muffled by their ongoing kiss. Gasping for breath, they reluctantly pulled away from each other, their lips still connected by a thin, glistening string of saliva. That was amazing, Yugito-chan, Naruto said breathlessly. With a heavy blush, Yugito blushed. Her body felt on fire. She wanted much more. She looked over Naruto's shoulder at Samui before smirking, knowing she was Naruto's first kiss. Samui smiled, amused, kissing Yugito's cheek before telling her good night. As soon as Yugito left, she grabbed Naruto's hand. I know a hotel nearby. She spoke with a low husky tone. Samui's body was almost sinful. Her white skin seemed to glow in the candlelight, and the muscles in her legs, her large S, and her hips moved and contracted with each step she took. Naruto saw the kunoichi's blonde hair loose over her shoulders to the top of her full S, falling in delicate curls. Even the hair of her seemed soft and wavy. How could such a beautiful woman be real? Naruto felt his heart ready to burst out of his chest, his hardening at the sight. Samui-chan. He could barely get the words out of his mouth. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time, she told him, half smiling as she got closer and closer until her face was but scant inches away from his. Samui, she placed one of her fingers on his lips, gently silencing his words. Don't say anything. Just kiss me. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. He always had a crush on Samui, and he had wanted to do this for quite a while before bringing their lips together in a passionate kiss. At that, any rational thought that Naruto might have felt vanished completely. He could feel the kunoichi's tongue dancing inside his mouth and her hands caressing his neck, her nails bringing a strange tickle to his nape. After a few wonderful moments, Samui stopped, the wet sound of their lips parting, almost echoing through the room. Your lips taste sweet, she whispered to him. Her hands left his neck and began to run over his shoulders for a few moments before going down his body, as smooth as silk. She took his hands and brought them to her so soft and delicate, vast and magnificent, and as warm as the sand irradiated by the sun. Touch me, Naruto-kun. I want you. Her body gave off an aroma of orchids, a most wonderful smell. Samui knew how beautiful she was. She wasn't blind. Many students had looked at her with lust, many asking her on dates, some giving her gifts, but she didn't care about them. She only cared about Naruto and her close friends, and now having his hands around her she felt like melting by his touch. Gods. Do you like them? Samui kissed him again before helping him remove his vest and shirt. Naruto's head was spinning, and his breath was failing him. You're amazing, Samui, Naruto said, finding it hard to breathe as his hands tried and failed to cup her overfilling his hands fully. She reached down to his breeches. I want to see you. Let me see you. Before realizing it, Naruto found himself as Samui was. Samui tossed his clothing into a corner of the room before looking up and down at him with a smile so suggestive it could have melted snow. You have a beautiful. The kunoichi told him. She slowly touched his member, firmly yet delicately. And so hard, too. Is it because of me? Naruto must be dreaming. It all felt so wonderful. Yes, it is. I'm flattered, she told him. But I wonder, does this pretty taste as sweet as your lips? Samui slowly knelt in front of him, kissing his chest and belly as she did so, her mouth watering at the sight of his. She had dreamed of him. She had touched herself, imagining it was Naruto. Now she had him right in front of her, and then slowly wrapped her lips, so full and soft, around his. Samui. Naruto could barely contain his the immense pleasure he was feeling was running down his spine. The sight of Samui, on her knees, tasting her, practically worshipping it, was beyond intoxicating. The blonde girl smiled triumphantly. Hearing him, her name brought her great joy. I guessed wrong, Samui told him, stopping for a moment. Yours doesn't taste as sweet as your lips. She smiled most wickedly. It tastes sweeter. Samui returned her mouth to his shaft. Naruto closed his eyes and enjoyed the sensation. As he listened to the wet sounds of Samui-ing on his, Naruto felt her hands begin to stroke his balls with remarkable skill. The kunoichi stopped ing after a few moments and instead began to the tip of his slowly with a smile on her face, twirling her tongue almost as if she wanted to torture him. Naruto had to admit that if that was her goal, she was doing a good job. Perhaps too good. Oh, Samui. She smiled up at him again and started to a little harder. She also started to hum while she gently bobbed her head, keeping eye contact with him as much as she could. Each time she drew back enough so that only his tip was in her mouth, she lavished it with her tongue. She was still learning what he liked and what worked best, but she was nothing if not a fast learner, and she was getting lots of practice. Then she tried something new. She started humming again, but this time, it wasn't a drawn-out purr, it was a melody. Naruto gasped. Tensing, his hips moved of their own accord as he thrust upwards a little. Samui backed off but didn't take him out of her mouth. He looked down, an apology on his lips, but it never left them as he met her eyes, dark with lust and hunger, as she descended, taking his entire length into her mouth, even pushing down the flesh of his pubic mound, giving herself an extra inch to enjoy. Samui. He choked, unsure how long he could hold on with the exposed head of his being squeezed and massaged by the top of her throat. Her eyes started to water as she felt her gag reflex, but she simply ignored it. She closed her eyes and continued to, pausing every few moments to take a deep breath through her nose, her lungs filling with his intoxicating musk. She shivered as another surge of arousal shot through her. She felt her s tingle and harden even more than they already were, if that were possible. Her erect oris, which was protruding from its protective hood and through her labia, throbbed almost painfully, and she almost whimpered with desire. She wanted him. Badly. And she didn't want just to his balls dry, she wanted to mount him. To straddle his waist and impale herself on this delicious piece of meat she was currently devouring as best she could. So delicious. Samui enjoyed every inch of it more than she thought possible. It tasted sweet and salty. It was perfect for her. She wondered if she was enjoying this more than Naruto. He kissed her lips softly before slowly moving down to her s to do the same. The kunoichi's tits were worthy of worship, soft and firm and warm. However, after a while of kissing one and then switching to the other, Naruto stopped. What are you doing? Keep going. Samui almost pouted. He couldn't take his eyes off of her tits, and Samui smirked at the attention she was receiving. Naruto palmed her tits and then went on to pull and tweak her s. Samui ed throughout, and she pulled him down and buried his face between her big tits. Naruto didn't hesitate for a second to kiss all over her exposed flesh, and Samui felt her small clothes dampen at just how enthusiastic her favorite blonde was at kissing and ing on her tits. Soon kissing Samui's smooth belly and then continued lower and lower. The scent of her cunt was strong and maddening, and her lips seemed already so wet, which only made Naruto's lust grow even more, almost making him lose what remained of his wits. When his tongue made contact with her, the kunoichi let out a little laugh. Oh, I see, she said, taking hold of him by the hair. Ah, yes. Oh, you are certainly better than I had thought. Oyesss. Just a little slower, she instructed him. Yes, like that. Naruto began to hear the kunoichi's voice growing thicker and sultrier with each passing moment. Quote. Samui ed, holding his hair even tighter. Don't stop. Keep going. Keep going. Yes, just a little more, please. I'm almost. The kunoichi's hips began to move back and forth. Naruto brought his hands to her ass cheeks and held them tight so as to steady her while keeping his mouth on her cunt. Yes, just like that. Just like that. Oh, yes, I'm coming. Naruto noticed how the kunoichi's legs began shaking violently for a few moments before stopping. He kissed her thighs and bit them gently before rising to his feet, feeling his almost moving on its own, desperate for touch and warmth. Did you enjoy that, Samui? Naruto asked with a smile. Come here, she told him, almost breathlessly, pressing their lips together again. The passion contained in her kisses was like nothing Naruto had ever experienced. You're amazing at eating my. I want to see how good your stamina is. She smiled mischievously at him before whispering into his ear, I hope you can keep up with me. Upon hearing that, Naruto couldn't contain his lust any longer. He grabbed Samui and forced her to kiss him. I must have you, Naruto told her, looking into her beautiful eyes. He pushed Samui against one of the room's walls, causing her to let out a startled yet amused noise, and then turned her around, placing her hands on the wall and arching her back so that her ass was sticking out at him. Naruto took his time in appreciating the kunoichi's beautiful behind, kneading it, feeling every wonderful curve. Her behind was most generous and soft, so marvelously firm and tight. Even his imagination hadn't done Samui justice. The kunoichi was every inch a goddess. See something you like? She asked in tease, faintly wiggling her rear. Naruto softly kissed her splendid ass. Most definitely, Samui-chan. He brought his hands to the mouth of her cunt and then began caressing it. She was very much wet. Please, she all but begged him. Don't make me wait. Naruto kissed the kunoichi's back before guiding his to her entrance, catching his breath momentarily before sliding his shaft gently and slowly into her cunt, savoring every moment of the process. Gods. Naruto could barely contain his bliss once he was fully inside of her. The kunoichi's cunt felt so wonderful, so tight and warm, that he had to take a couple of deep breaths to keep himself from losing what little control he still had. Oh, Naruto. Samui ed. This was her first time. She had heard the first time could be painful, but she was feeling not but pure blissful. You are quite big. Kunoichi Samui told him, beginning to move back and forth. You feel so good inside me. Naruto placed his hands on the kunoichi's hips and gripped them tight. Soon he was following her rhythm, matching her pace, moving in and out of her, hearing the sound of flesh pounding flesh, and enjoying the wonderful feeling of her walls around his and her beautiful rear hitting the base of his. Yes, 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 yes. Samui repeated. Me, Naruto. Oh, this is amazing. Nearly mad with lust, Naruto couldn't contain his instinct to slap one of her ass cheeks. The kunoichi squealed before ing loudly. Again. Harder. I'm sorry. Smack. He slid out of the kunoichi and turned her around to face him. You are marvelous, he told her between kisses before lifting her body into his arms. Samui let out a small cry of surprise mixed with delight. Naruto carried her carefully to the bed, trying not to take his eyes off her beautiful face. Once in bed, Naruto once began to kiss Samui deeply, caressing her neck, face, and hair, trying to let her know that she wasn't just a distraction to him without using a single word. When his breath finally began to run out, Naruto stopped, opened his eyes, and looked at Samui's face. She caressed his chest with her fingertips and smiled at him. For the first time since they had begun, the smile on Samui's face was not one of seduction or mischief but rather one of joy and happiness, which somehow made her seem even more beautiful than she already was. She held power over him, Naruto realized. Samui was perhaps the most amazing woman that he'd ever met in his life. You're amazing, Naruto, she told him, sounding almost as if it were a confession on her part. After spending quite a while kissing each other most passionately, Naruto positioned his body over Samui's and entered her wonderful cunt once again, looking into her eyes, so full of longing and desire. Oh, gods, Naruto said as he began to her in earnest, steadily increasing his pace. The kunoichi eagerly began to match him, moving her hips upwards to meet his. Yes, like this, she whispered to him, playfully biting his ear. Keeping me like this. Her words made Naruto lose his senses completely. He began her as fast as he possibly could, grunting wildly like some kind of animal, not caring one bit about controlling himself. He was in a state of absolute bliss and complete ecstasy, like nothing he had ever felt before in his life. Yet, upon hearing a sudden noise of apparent discomfort coming from the kunoichi, Naruto immediately decided to slow himself down. What's wrong? She whispered to him, kissing his neck. Why are you holding back? I don't want to hurt you, Samui. Naruto told her. It was true, he would rather stop this now than cause her any sort of pain. All is well, she told him, gently kissing his lips. Don't worry, I will not break. Please, I want to see you, the real you. Let me see you as you really are. But, she kissed him again and silenced his objections. Seeing how much Samui wanted them to make love without any sort of inhibition. He once more began to her at his own pace and rhythm, completely losing all sense of time or place. Gods, you're perfect, Samui whispered, either to him or to herself, the sound of her voice barely noticeable over the noise of their bodies violently crashing together. She brought her hands down to his ass and gave them a light squeeze. You really are a shinobi. Naruto couldn't help but let out a small laugh, which fortunately was accompanied by that of Samui. People said the most absurd and ridiculous things when they ed, true, but that also was somehow part of its charm, he supposed. It didn't take too long before they both found themselves drenched in sweat and gasping for air, but that only made Naruto push himself even harder. Naruto didn't pause in his rough thrusts inside Samui's cunt. His balls loudly slapped her at a rapid rate, and Samui's screams of pleasure were very loud. She slumped forward as he pounded her cunt. Her tits were in front of his face again, and Naruto's blue eyes lit up as he ed on her tits once more. After a few minutes, Naruto pushed Samui down by her hips and had her riding his up and down. They were both breathing heavily, and it was clear that their climaxes would be soon. A few more minutes of riding his later and Samui could see Naruto's climax was imminent. His breathing had gotten harsher, and the rhythm of his thrusts faltered slightly. "I'm close," he gasped. Samui pushed his chest with her hands from where he had been sitting up, and he laid down against the bed. Samui's hands rested against his chest as she rode his up and down, her cunt clenching around him to milk him of his seed. "Come for me, Naruto." Samui ed from above him. "Fill my cunt up." Naruto reached his hand forward and circled her with his fingers. He was keen to see them fall over the edge together, and Samui was so close. Her cunt was like a vice-like grip around Naruto's thick, and at any moment, she was going to explode all over it. Samui. The words sent Naruto flying over the edge, and he exploded inside Samui's cunt. His twitched as his seed spilled inside Samui's, and despite the fact he was coming hard, Naruto still managed to rub her to make sure she came along with him. Naruto. Oh gods, yes. Samui cried as they both came together. Her thighs were wet from her cum, and it dripped onto Naruto's balls before landing on the bed. Samui fell forward onto his chest, and after a few shallow thrusts, where Naruto was giving her the last of his seed, they both hugged each other as they tried to recover from the first they had in their lives. "That was," Naruto began. "Amazing," Samui replied and gave him a kiss after he nodded in agreement. But that wasn't the end. Samui mounted Naruto, and they continued for 5 more hours. Samui made sure to use a seal on her belly to prevent herself from getting pregnant. Sleeping in each other's arms, Samui and Naruto felt at peace. Naruto was warm. That was the first thing he noticed as his mind started to wake up. The second thing he noticed was that he was lying on his back, and he had a rather prominent morning erection. The third thing he noticed was that it was wet. Very wet. And somewhere hot. And tight. As he blinked, one hand came up to rub his face while the other went down under the quilt to investigate and quickly found a soft head of hair over his erection. He quickly lifted the blanket and looked down his torso into the smiling blue eyes of his equally very blonde bedmate, who smiled around the hard she was gently ling when her eyes met his, and she winked. Samui? He asked groggily. Samui's lips slowly made their way up his throbbing shaft, savoring every inch that passed between her full, pink lips. With each movement, she could feel the heat emanating from his body, causing her own to tingle. The anticipation of what was to come was almost too much to bear. Finally, just the tip of his crown remained between her lips, and with a wet pop, it came free from its wonderful prison. Samui let out a deep sigh of satisfaction, her tongue eagerly exploring every inch of his shaft as she continued to kiss him with fervor. The sensation was almost overwhelming. "Morning, Naruto," she purred. "Hope you don't mind. I woke up a short while ago and found this rather impressive sword of yours poking me rather insistently between my legs, so I thought I'd have a little bit of a pre-breakfast breakfast if you know what I mean." As she wrapped up her statement, her eyes locked with his, and she couldn't resist the temptation to take hold of his shaft once again. She ran her tongue teasingly along the length of it before finally placing it in her mouth, savoring the sensation of its weight and warmth against her tongue. Slowly and deliberately, she began to hem in, her mouth enveloping him inch by inch as she descended down its length, savoring every moment of the experience. With each passing moment, she consumed him more and more, her lips and tongue working in perfect harmony to bring him to the brink of ecstasy. It was an act of utter submission, a moment of complete surrender to the power of her desire, and one that left him utterly breathless and completely consumed by the intensity of her passion. Oh gods. No. I don't mind. At all. Oh man, that feels like heaven, he replied as she moved her lips up and down with a steady, rhythmic motion. He let out a low, guttural of pleasure. With each passing second, he felt himself getting lost in the sensation of her warm, wet mouth wrapped around him. His fingers traced gentle circles on her scalp as she continued to stroke him, her tongue swirling and fing in all the right places. She also started to hum while she gently bobbed her head, keeping eye contact with him as much as she could. Each time she drew back enough so that only his tip was in her mouth, she lavished it with her tongue. She was still learning what he liked and what worked best, but she was nothing if not a fast learner, and she was getting lots of practice. Then she tried something new. She started humming again, but this time, it wasn't a drawn-out purr, it was a melody. Naruto gasped, tensing, his hips moved of their own accord as he thrust upwards a little. Samui backed off but didn't take him out of her mouth. He looked down, an apology on his lips, but it never left them as he met her eyes, dark with lust and hunger, as she descended, taking his entire length into her mouth, even pushing down the flesh of his pubic mound, giving herself an extra inch to enjoy. Samui. He choked, not sure how long he could hold on with the exposed head of his being squeezed and massaged by the top of her throat. Her eyes started to water as she felt her gag reflex, but she simply ignored it. She closed her eyes and continued to, pausing every few moments to take a deep breath through her nose, her lungs filling with his intoxicating musk. She shivered as another surge of arousal shot through her. She felt her eyes tingle and harden even more than they already were, if that were possible. Her erect oris, which was protruding from its protective hood and through her labia, throbbed almost painfully, and she almost whimpered with desire. She wanted him, badly. And she didn't want just to his balls dry, she wanted to mount him. To straddle his waist and impale herself on this delicious piece of meat she was currently devouring as best she could. So delicious. She had heard from her mother what it is like to be with a man. She had described the taste as bitter, but to Samui, she couldn't help but feel she was eating the most delicious lollipop in the world. She enjoyed every inch more than she thought possible. It tasted sweet and salty. It was perfect for her. She wondered if she was enjoying this more than Naruto. Lifting her head to leisurely on his glands, ing his frenulum with long gentle strokes, which she'd learned, he really liked. She paused as she felt his shaft twitch and swell a little, accompanied by Naruto's grunted cry. Samui. His words turned into a choked gasp as she felt his shaft pulse in her hand, and her mouth was filled with the warm, thick, sweet liquid she found herself starting to crave. She ate around his shaft as she was hungry yet leisurely swallowed every trace, her fatigue leaving her as soon as she felt that warm, life-giving, settle in her belly. She then slowly sat up, then raised herself up onto her knees, then shuffled forward until she was straddling his hips. The wet, saliva-coated glands of her lover's just scant centimeters from her own dripping slit. It would be so easy. Just lower herself an inch, and he'd be inside her. She thought of perhaps mounting him right now, having his seed in her womb, while right now would be early to have children, later, perhaps after they marry. She shook her head, shaking that fantasy out of her mind, well, as much as she could, and looked down at him, smiling. Look at me, Naruto. He did, his eyes trailing over her flushed face, neck, and chest. Her S heaving as she breathed, her S hard points that capped each soft, firm mound. Her lips were swollen and red from ing him, and between her legs, her other lips, still smooth, were wet. So wet, in fact, that he could clearly see it, clinging to her labia and her. A few drops and even fell out of her and onto his wet. If he had to be honest, she was a vision of divine beauty, and he would be perfectly okay waking up like this from now on. You're beautiful, Samui. Thank you. So are you, especially your. She said, smiling at him, her eyes still shining with carnal lust and desire, but he could also see another emotion he couldn't quite put a name to. He took hold of her hips and rolled with her. She giggled as he did it. Naruto, completely, stroked his slowly as he observed Samui lounging on his bed. Well, not exactly lounging. Her large bare tits sloped to the sides slightly from their own weight. Her pretty, cream skin neck pressed against the edge of the bed, her head upside down. Her eyes, dark with lust, twinkled mischievously, and her cute pink tongue slipped out to wet her lips. Naruto immediately stopped stroking his. He might accidentally come from just looking at the gorgeous woman. He was walking toward her now. Samui's eyes followed the bounce of his with each step he took until he was standing right in front of her. The kunoichi even crossed her eyes to keep it in focus then. Naruto cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her chin. She parted her mouth instinctually, and her gaze tore away from his to look him straight in his eyes. Tell me what you really want, and I'll pound your throat just the way you like. She shivered at his words, and when she swallowed, Naruto could tell how wet her throat was from the messy sound alone. I want you to my mo. Naruto slipped his hand up her neck, squeezing it lightly and cutting her off. Samui let out a sharp gasp, and her thigh quivered a bit from the rough action. You have a very filthy mouth. Sorry, she said, but not meaning it. The shinobi smirked down at her. That's okay, now continue what you were saying. Samui blinked and breathed out through her nose before continuing, her voice husky, it's me. You own me. You own my tits. You own my cunt. You own my ass, and today I want you to own my throat. Please use me. Use my throat until I can't breathe, Naruto. Naruto let out a deep groan at the filth coming from her mouth and began rubbing his against her pretty face. Her tongue came out instantly to greet his thick shaft, giving it kittenish as Naruto haphazardly ran his all over her face. That's a good girl. I'm going to destroy your throat for you. That's what you want, yeah. Samui let out a choked whimper. An unintentionally wise sound made Naruto's throb. He let go of her neck and gripped the base of his, slapping her lips a few times with the head. As Samui's lips parted, her mouth opened wide, revealing her pearly white teeth and a pink tongue that beckoned to him. The heat of her breath against the sensitive skin of his head sent shivers down his spine, causing him to grasp her hair tightly. With a sudden movement, he plunged his throbbing member deep down her throat, relishing in the sensation of her warm tongue massaging him as he thrust in and out of her sloppy mouth. Naruto fit his thick, fat all the way to the back with only a little effort. With his pubic bone pressing against Samui's plump lower lip, blanching it white, Naruto couldn't even see her face over his groin. Instead, he took in the erection-inducing sight of her throat bulging from stretching around his. Naruto hissed in approval, hell Samui, you should see yourself, see how you take my so good down your throat. I could come just from looking at you like this. She edged loudly against his, and Naruto knew he needed to start moving before he spilled his seed from her simply vibrating around him. Naruto pulled his back. Her stubborn lips clung tightly to the head of his, not allowing it to exit her mouth completely. Naruto let out a chuckle, deciding not to force it out. He leaned forward, wrapping his large hands around her petite ankles. He used the position for leverage before he began ramming his down her gullet. Glurk 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 glurk. The cacophony of sounds emerging from Samui would make their way into Naruto's dreams, so disgusting and sloppy they were. Gushing saliva, grunts of exertion, harsh gags from his going so deep, and choking from everything being too much, it was intoxicating. Samui, the whole hotel can probably hear this tight throat. You're such a good girl, making pretty music for me. Naruto growled as he continued to breed her throat, his balls slapping roughly against her nose. She once told him that she loved the sting from that kinky bitch. Samui had iron lungs, and she continued to gargle and spit around his. He could feel the mixture of his precum and her saliva soaking and dripping down his groin, inevitably staining her face. What a sight she would make when he finally pulled off her. But first, he would make her come. Her was soaked through, the sharp scent tickling his nostrils. He slowly entered his thick fingers into her cunt, her juices soaking his fingers almost immediately, causing squelching sounds as he forced his fingers deep. Naruto could tell Samui was ing again from the hum against his, and he slowed down his thrusts so he could focus on making her scream instead. Naruto curled 2 fingers inside her, broaching her walls until he found the ridged edge of her, stroking it incessantly while pressing his thumb against her. It only took seconds before her walls began fluttering against his thick fingers, and very soon after, she was screaming around his as her thighs shook violently, forcing Naruto to hold her legs down lest she falls over. Naruto stopped thrusting his in her mouth and let her orgasm settle before sliding his out of her abused throat. Naruto let out a choked grunt when he finally looked down at Samui. Thick strands of cummy spit ran down Samui's face, clinging to her left cheek and over her right brow. There were strands around her eyes, less opaque as they mixed with her tears. Even more, strands ran down her hairline and coated her beautiful hair. She looked completely debased, and Naruto almost came from the sight. Naruto's voice came out low and dark with desire. You look gorgeous like this, Samui, covered in your filthy spit. Samui locked eyes with him, and Naruto finally noticed how glazed over they were. Naruto, she murmured, her voice light, high and unfocused. Naruto's twitched from that, and he swallowed deeply to control himself. Naruto rubbed his against her face, spreading around his precum and her saliva and making a bigger mess of her beautiful face. Samui let out a pleased sigh at his actions and held her mouth open, waiting for him to fill it up. He obliged her, slowly pressing until he slated his pelvis against her face once more. He petted her throat as he sawed in and out of it, chasing his release now. Her throat was gushy and warm, and her muscles pressed tightly against his shaft. It wouldn't take long. Naruto's balls were churning, ready to engorge her gut with his seed. I'm gonna come, gonna fill your stomach up. Naruto snarled as he started pounding her, excess saliva splattering his groin with each thrust now. Hear it, ing, take it. With a primal roar, he released, his hot essence spilling over Samui's lips and down her throat, eliciting a shuddering from her as she savored the taste of him. Naruto's world spun as he basked in the afterglow, his mind consumed by the raw, animalistic pleasure that had just consumed him. He pulled out, knowing in this state he might actually drown Samui with his cum, and let the rest of it splatter across her tits and stomach. Thick opaque stands shining in the low light of the room. Covered in his spunk, her face dripping with cum and saliva, she was a work of art. Naruto took a deep breath after the productive orgasm and brought his stained head to Samui's mouth. She wrapped her lips around it, ling and swirling her tongue under his foreskin and diligently cleaning him before letting go of it with a pop. So amazing, Naruto muttered in awe before he quickly took the towel he laid nearby before starting and sat next to Samui, maneuvering the gorgeous girl so she leaned her back against his chest. He gently wiped her face and chest. She purred and almost melted against him, her body loose and limp. Samui stretched her head and began nuzzling Naruto's neck, leaving the barest of kisses over and over on the same spot. Such a good girl, Samui. Naruto hugged her close, her nose digging into his neck, and he felt her breathe him in. How about we invite Yugito next? She purred, her voice low and sultry. I'm sure she would love it. As she spoke, Samui leaned in closer to Naruto, her lips hovering just inches away from his. Without hesitation, she pressed her mouth to his, her tongue seeking entrance right away, the intensity of their kiss sending shivers down her spine. As Samui's tongue expertly explored every corner of Naruto's mouth, the blonde male's breath became ragged, and his body began to quiver with pleasure. He couldn't help but as the sensations overwhelmed him, his hands tangling in Samui's hair as he pulled her closer. 1 month later. It's been over 3 months since Team 10 was officially recognized as a team. When Darui claimed he was going to make his Genins the greatest ninjas in Kumo, he wasn't joking. As a result, he developed a training schedule for them to follow between missions. They will complete at least 2D rank tasks every day on weekdays in order to meet their quota of receiving a C rank assignment in the future. After the missions are completed, they will return to their training schedule for the remainder of the day. This involves assisting them in increasing their strength, speed, and endurance. It was a regular activity for the young Yatsuki for someone like Naruto, who has been practicing since he can remember and has a strong chakra monster as an ally who is also continuously refilling his energy reserves. Omoi, on the other hand, was having some difficulty with his physical powers. He had little stamina, but he had the lowest when compared to her. Darui had made it his particular duty to assist Omoi in improving and expanding his jutsu arsenal. In combat, the more jutsus learns, the more choices he has. It would be a pity to leave Omoi behind when it comes to his elemental training, especially since Darui already understood Naruto's inclination for fire, lighting, and wind and Yugito's love for fire and lightning. Omoi was given a chakra paper by Darui, who instructed him to channel his chakra into it. Surprisingly, the paper disintegrated to dust, demonstrating Omoi's affinity for the earth. Darui was pleased with the fact that his team's nature transformations are well balanced. Water is the only affinity that isn't present. Omoi was handed scrolls to work on his earth affinity, but he also always said that his strength was in Kenjutsu. Naruto received a few scrolls based on the new lightning jutsus. The majority of the jutsus are C rank or above, and Darui believed Naruto could manage the jutsu's strength and chakra needs since he was already a proficient lightning-style user. Tower of Raikage. Team 10 is currently in front of the Raikage, with C and another Chunin standing alongside him. They'd just concluded their first D-rank mission of the day, and the elderly Raikage was ready to give them another. The task was simple. Capture Tora, the daimyo's wife's cat. Tora has a habit of running away, thus, it was a classic pain in the mission for new genins. She has proved to be very tough to trap, and once caught, she has a habit of scratching the living daylights out of a genin's face. Omoi was the unlucky one, as he was dazzled by the cat's cuteness and wanted to touch her immediately. However, the unfortunate Omoi failed to notice the cat's stinging claws and injured a piece of his face. When Tora sprang free from Omoi's grasp, Yugito swooped in and captured her before she could go. Tora, to everyone's astonishment, did not struggle in the Yugito's grip, surprising his friends and enraging Omoi even more. Tora seemed to be fairly calm and nice when it came to Yugito. She even purred deeply in her arms while in her face. Darui reasoned that it might be because of Yugito's biju. Tora was seized from Yugito's loving hug by the daimyo's wife as soon as they arrived at the Raikage Tower. "Oh, my sweet cat. You have been a very naughty girl, haven't you? But don't worry, Mummy will make sure you will never do it again," the daimyo's wife says, but she seems to be squeezing the life out of the poor cat in her supposed affectionate hug. I understand why the cat runs away so frequently, Yugito reflected, his face mournful. HMPH. That cat is receiving what she deserves. But damn, I can't help but feel sorry for her now, Omoi reflected with a half-satisfied smirk on his face. And here I was thinking the cat was simply a pain in the ass, but apparently, she just wanted some space, Naruto reasoned, his eyes sympathetic. Team 10 then returns their focus to the ancient Raikage as the daimyo's wife departs with a tearful Tora, begging for Yugito to rescue her. Congratulations, Team 10. Another successful assignment in your record. Now, if you desire another mission, we have numerous requests: babysitting a lord's kid, repainting the fences of a merchant's home, or... Ai's speech was cut short by Yugito's irritated scream. No. With all due respect, Raikage-sama, these missions are totally bogus. Babysitting, fence painting, capturing a fugitive cat, I thought we were ninjas, not babysitters, said Yugito after being struck in the head by an embarrassed Darui. Darui could only mutter, "Language, young lady." I agree with Yugito, Raikage-sama. Not that I don't understand why we're performing these missions since we're still fresh, genin, but don't you think we've done enough D ranks to earn us at least a C rank mission, don't you think? Naruto sought to emphasize Yugito's remarks in a courteous way. I questioned, what do you think, Darui-san? Do you believe your kids are ready for AC rank? Well, in the last 3 months, we've finished 79 D ranks, Darui said. They usually require at least 50 D ranks to achieve AC rank, which they have, and I can safely state that they are ready. Not to brag, but I taught them well, and they are a really skilled set of young shinobis, Darui added proudly. Very good then. I agrees. Now, I have one C rank mission for you to do. I says as he pulls out one mission scroll. The mission is requested by the Wagarashi family, from the land of tea, and it is about the annual, Todoroki Shrine race, which will begin in 2 days, and it will take at least a day to arrive in the land of tea. I informed. Hold on, isn't land of tea part of land of fire? Naruto inquired. Knowing the geography, he knew the relationship between Kumo and Konoha was neutral right now. They weren't enemies or allies. At least their relationship was better than I was with pretty much everyone else. Indeed, Naruto, but it seems Land of Tea wants us to protect someone, and Darui, I want you to look into something while you're there, I explained towards the Jonin, who simply shrugged his shoulders. Naruto inquired, who are we escorting? I just said, I don't know. Yugito inquired, what do you mean you don't know, Raikage-sama? They have a dedication ceremony at the Great Todoroki Shrine once every 4 years in the neighboring nation of the Land of Tea, and we've received a request to escort the runner, who will participate in the race that will be held there, but an assailant from the opponent's side attacked the messengers before they arrived here, I explained. Darui inquired, assailant, were they able to identify them? The messengers weren't sure, but they think it was a shinobi, I said, but if that's the case, this task might be raised to an A- rank if you see any. Omoi said, forgive me, Raikage-sama, but I still don't comprehend this task. You should acquire the specifics straight from the Wagarashi family's head, Gyogo, I said, and I encourage you to go immediately for the Land of Tea since time is of importance. Yes, Raikage-sama, Team 10 agreed, bowing respectfully. Darui advised his staff, I'll allow you guys an hour to go home and gather all the basics you need for a 1-week excursion, then meet me at the village gate when you're done. I wishes them all the best of luck.